Speaker, thank you. Look, this is a common sense bill, and it is actually really good that it's going to be supported across the House, but there are going to be some of the comments which have been made about this, which I do want to respond to. This is about allowing Class 3 gaming operators to be exempted from the prohibition on online gaming, in other words, to allow them to do online gambling. I'd just like to remind the House that to be a Class 3 gaming organisation, no machines are allowed, so that's the kind of thing that Cameron Brewer was talking about there's none of that immediate rush of a return on the gambling. They've got to be prizes over $5,000, and they've also got to be for authorised charitable purposes or non-commercial purposes. Now, Lawrence Junan, when he was speaking, sort of questioned whether all of these organisations should be Class 3 operators, and of course that's something that can be done from time to time. I note that some charities occasionally are challenged in whether they are actually charitable or not. But I just invite the House to look at the 6 classes that there already are in the Act at the moment. The first 2 of them, Class 1, Class 2, don't actually need a licence. Then there's this Class 3, which is, as I said, as I've just set out. Then you've got Class 4, which is the gaming machines, which obviously is a much higher risk sort of proposition, and we recognise that. And then you've got casinos in Class 5, and then you've got Class 6, which is lotteries. So if you're not going to be Class 3 and you're in that category, what are you going to say? You don't need a licence because you're definitely not one of the others, or you've got to create an entirely new category. So I think that we're being invited, Lawrence, I think I can see you're pondering this one now. Dr. Junan is pondering this. You'd have to create an entirely new category for any of those kind of organisations, or simply say they are not allowed to raise funds through any form of gambling, which is maybe where he wants to go. But that's a pretty significant step for any of those kind of organisations. I'd also just like to remind the House that this class represents 1% of gambling, so it's not a very large amount. And we've already heard the community organisations that are involved in raising funds in this way include sporting organisations, health and welfare organisations, hospices, etc. So they are doing good work around our country. And what we did hear from them in terms of the submissions, Madam Speaker, is we had 15 submissions. That's not very many, but 13 of them were from Class 3 operators saying, actually, this is really, really important to us. We want to be able to continue to do this. Just 2 raised concerns. Now, until COVID came along, all of that fundraising was being done in the old school way, door-to-door, postal, all of those kind of things. Really quite inefficient way of doing things, I guess. But what happened in COVID is that the government of the day set up a trial of 3 organisations who were allowed to go online. We've already heard about those, Countdown Kids, Royal New Zealand Coast Guard and Heart Foundation. And then in 2021, that was extended to all Class 3 operators. And I guess the question I would ask the House is, has that resulted in a lot of gambling harm? Now, when we had the submissions, one of the submitters who did appear in front of us was invited. In fact, I said to them, well, have you got, because they were concerned about the impact of gambling generally and online gambling generally and the potential for harm. And I said, specifically about Class 3, is there any evidence that you can give to us as a select committee that it's caused harm? And they weren't able to do so. And I think that is the key, is that there's a significant difference between Class 3 gambling and the other sort of gambling, the machine gambling, the casino gambling, where there is that immediate investment return, or loss of money, and that those are quite different situations. So we had, as I said, 13 of the 15 submitters who were in favour. They were all Class 3 operators, and they said that it was essential to their effective fundraising. I think it's a recognition that the world has changed in the last 4 or 5 years, where there is no going back on that it would cost a lot more, be a lot less efficient in terms of raising funds for them if they were not able to continue. And that is the key, and that's the reason. And Dr. Junan again said, this could have been done a lot earlier. Well, I just would say to you is that there has been a lot of work that the government is doing across a lot of different areas. I acknowledge that you don't agree with much of it, but there has been a lot of work being done, and the question is, where would you slot a piece of legislation like this? And you did acknowledge that it was not Dr. Junan did acknowledge that it is not a substantive bill, maybe it could have been started earlier, but it's been started now, and I think we have seen no evidence that there is a concern that needs to take 6 months. And if we did take 6 months now, it would disrupt all the fundraising operation of all those organisations for a very long period of time. And so I invite those speakers on the opposition benches to consider the balance of harm. The Department of Internal Affairs said there is no issue. The submitters were not able to identify any issue in terms of harm, and we haven't seen any issue in terms of harm over the last, 4 years of the operation of Class 3 online. And what that suggests to me is that there is very little likelihood of harm, but there is a huge likelihood of significant harm to all of those organisations were we to interrupt their ability to raise funds as they are doing at the moment under the temporary exemption if that was not to be able to be continued. So I guess what that says is that you either legislate to continue the temporary arrangement, then have to come back knowing the likelihood is that you just want to make it permanent in a period of time when we've got some more evidence, whatever that might be, or you legislate now. And then obviously there'll be monitoring, and over a period of time, in the very, very, very unlikely circumstances that there was some harm that was found to be being done, it is within the power of the House to legislate and say, well, maybe we do want to change that. But I think that, Madam Speaker, is very, very unlikely. As I said, the Department of Internal Affairs said they had no concerns, that it's very lowish risk, or very low risk, and that was around those issues of no instant gratification, no adrenaline rush. And so I don't think that the concerns that are being expressed hold a lot of water, but I guess that is what the opposition is supposed to do, to raise concerns about legislation from the government, and that's what they're doing, and good on them for doing that, but I don't think that those positions hold a lot of water. The Honourable Jan Tinetti talked about the issue around harm, but I would also invite the opposition to consider that the Gambling Act is not just about minimising harm. It's also about raising funds for community purposes, and so there's a number of different issues, and also making sure that these things are well regulated so there's no corruption or anything else in the way in which money is raised through gambling. So I'd invite the opposition to consider the balance of the intent and the purposes of the Gambling Act rather than just that one important that it is issue. And finally, I'd just like to say that just consider if we were to say to these organisations who are Class 3 operators at the moment, look, for a while we'd like you to go back to the old ways of doing things. It'd be a little bit like saying, well, for a while, just turn your email off, turn your social media off, actually that might be quite a good idea, but turn all of those things off and go back to the old way of doing things for a while. Rely on the good old New Zealand Post and just see how you'd like it. Now, I don't think that many members of Parliament would think that that is a particularly reasonable way to go, and that is exactly what, in effect, a delay would do for these organisations. Madam Speaker, the bill is common sense, it's pragmatic, it makes permanent an existing temporary practice, and it's a temporary practice that in the last 3 years have really seen no problems caused. New Zealand First is committed to policies that protect and enhance our communities, and Madam Speaker, I suggest that allowing these great organisations to continue to raise funds in this way in an efficient, practical way is good common sense. I commend this bill to the House.